Okay, good morning. We're gonna start. Hopefully we'll start by me being able to forward the slides. We're gonna start by doing with introductions, and we'll start around the table here at the office, and then I'll read through the list of participants on the Zoom. So I'm Jen Saponis, CDTC staff. On the left.
I'm Simon, CDTC staff.
Ivan Vamos, New York Bicycling Coalition, and also de facto representative of all old people walking when they can.
John Scavo, Town of Clifton Park.
Linda Vonderheide, Runster County.
Rebecca Odell, CDTC staff.
And in the corner, we have Carrie Ward. And you may, Rebecca is our newest staff person, so we welcome her to her first active transportation advisory committee meeting. On the Zoom, I have Dave Wooden, Martin Daly, Charles Welge, Ed Brennan, Ethan Warren, Jen Vigiani, Lynn Wilkuski, Peter Knudsen, Rima Sharia, and Valerie Dean. I don't think I missed anyone, but if I did, please let me know. And throughout the meeting, if you have any questions or comments, definitely put them in the chat or raise your hand and unmute yourself. We don't have too many people, so we can keep things pretty casual. Okay, so we had a presentation planned from Tom Polk of the YMCA down in the Hudson Valley, and unfortunately Tom was actually in a bike crash and was injured and unable to join us today. So we wish Tom well and hope he is better soon and can do a presentation sometime in the future. So instead, Payam offered to do a review of regional traffic trends based on new data that CDTC has, and with some observations of things that are going on in the region, because I think that these are things that will help us with planning, and there are things to keep monitoring. We don't know if they are long-term, permanent changes or just temporary shifts, but either way, there are definitely some interesting information to keep track of, and it's related to some of the trail counts that are ongoing or that we're planning in the next few weeks. So we'll talk about that afterwards. So I'm gonna actually let Payam take over the computer here and talk about the regional traffic trend.
Okay, so earlier this year, CDTC conducted traffic counts in a number of locations across the region. So this presentation is going to be about the data from those counts, and then later we're going to speak about a new data tool that CDTC recently got access to, called Replica. And before we start the analysis of the locations of the traffic volume, I just want to say that the locations were chosen from staff member and community members for specific reasons that they wanted post-2020 counts, post-COVID counts. So the data isn't representative of the region, and we'll see that a little bit when we compare the two data sources, because they, we'll see that they don't necessarily line up. So we collected data from traffic counts from 45 sites, and we found that traffic was down an average of 12% compared to the most recent pre-2020 count. So New York State DOT has traffic counts for roads throughout our region that they collect over time. most of the counts were around 2018 or 2019. Some of them go as far back as 10 years ago. But yeah, so they go down 12%, and then the peak hour volume, which is usually the afternoon, when people are coming home from work or from school, was down 18%. This matches what larger studies have seen, that even where traffic has risen and there's more cars on the road, the peaks have flattened because people are working from home and making their trips throughout the day, not necessarily in the usual pattern of going to work in the morning and going home in the afternoon. Of the 45 counts, 12 of them saw an increase in vehicle volumes. That's about a quarter. And we'll get into a little bit more specifics of where those locations were. Some of them were small increase, like 2%, 1%, while the decrease in traffic in some places was as much as 50%. So that's why overall, across all 45 locations, there was a decrease of 12, even though there was a significant amount of locations with increases. So, as you might imagine, the place where we saw the largest decrease in vehicle volumes were the 5 accounts that were near office complexes. Those were the 4 street locations that we did traffic counts around. Overall, traffic was down 40% on these streets, and peak volumes were down more than 50%. This is, kind of expected from work from home. It's more dramatic than what we see just on regular roadways, because the streets that we counted on primarily serve the office complex and don't have other uses on them, like residential or commercial. So these streets kind of saw the largest impact of work from home. Another interesting distinction between where we saw differences in traffic volume changes was by road classification. On urban roads, we saw, well, first let me explain the road classification system. All roads are classified generally as urban or rural, and then more specifically as arterial or local roads. So we analyzed data by splitting urban roads and rural roads, and more specifically by the smaller classifications. But in general, the urban roads that we counted traffic on saw 14% fewer vehicles on them, and the peak hours saw around 20% lower volumes, while the rural roads only had a 3.6% reduction, and a slightly larger peak hour reduction. But one of the reasons for this could be because rural roads don't serve like office complexes and aren't generally, although they have lower vehicle volume in general, they're not as affected by the changes that we've seen post 2020. People still need to access their homes and the businesses that are on these rural roads.
Also, a lot of people in the rural areas are more likely to have jobs that they have to show up to. You know, a lot of times lower income and things like that.
Yeah. So that was just a little peek into the traffic counts that CDTC conducted. We just got that data back recently, so we're still gonna do more analysis of it, and we might continue adding to that data set of, as we get new counts in, we'll add them and see how they match with that. So that brings us to Replica, which is a data set that includes data for mobility, so transportation, but also has land use and economic activity data. CDTC just recently got access to this, so we're still trying to figure out how we can use it within our different tap and projects. And we haven't been able to validate it yet, so this is Replica's data, and while they do their own validation, we haven't been able to do that independently. The way Replica data works is they create synthetic tricks based on a bunch of different data, including cell phone data, card data, but also credit card transactions, and then public data like from the census, so population, land use, and things like that. They released their two different data sets. One is called Places, which shows how it's kind of a regional transportation model, so you can see where origin, destination, and other ways that people are moving within a region. But they also have a set called Trends, which shows just generally how mobility is changing within a region, and they release that weekly. They release weekly updates to that, and they have data as far back as 2019, which is helpful for us because it shows that pre-2020 change. So the first graph I'm going to show you is weekly data compared to in 2022 compared to 2019. It's up to August 2nd, I think, is the last week. So there's one line for each week. As you can see, generally, transportation trips have increased over the last 3 years. And just a note, Replica isn't just measuring vehicle volumes like the previous data that CDTC had. This is going to include walking, biking, transit, at pretty much every trip, except for recreational trips, which are like people jogging or walking their dog and things like that. They filter those out. So
What's on the horizontal scale?
that's weeks of the year. So starting from the first line going up is the January 1st week, until you'll see there aren't 52 because it's comparing 2022, so just till August. Yeah, sorry about that. It didn't come with a x-axis. So so I guess total trips have increased from about 1.5% more recently in July to 12% in February compared to 2019, which is quite a bit different from what I had just presented a few minutes ago, which showed that vehicle volumes have largely decreased across the region. And there's two reasons. This is not just vehicle trips, these are all trips. And also, like I said earlier, the CDTC data isn't representative of the region, and we're likely to be on roads that saw a decrease because that's what we were trying to see. There's two graphs on this page which show similar data, but I know it's hard to see maybe the labels, so I'll just go through them quickly while you look at them. The graph on the left shows mode split between 4 trips in the region. As you can see, these two graphs are just showing the last year of data. They're not going back to 2019. So the line on the top that shows about 75% of trips are driving a personal automobile. Those next two lines are car passengers, so people getting rides, and walking trips. And then those bottom two lines are transit trips and biking trips that are about like 1 to 3%. The passenger and walking trips are, I think, about 10 to 12% each. And they haven't changed much in the last year. They're pretty much straight line. The graph on the right that is the trip purpose. So this shows the destination of trips that were taken. The top line are trips where people are going home, is about 1/3 of all trips in the region. The next one is shopping trips, which are about 20% of all trips in the region. Work trips are that purple, that like purplish line, which are 10 to 15%. Social trips are the next lower line, the second to bottom line for the current time period, which are about 10%, and then the bottom trip are to food establishments and restaurants. So you might know this, but since the reason why home trips aren't 50% of all trips, you think that people go to wherever they're going, then go home, is because of trip training. So for example, if someone went to work and then drove to CDTC for this meeting, that would be then 2 trips. And they'd only be going home once that day, obviously. So it ends up being about a third based on trip training and other trips that take place. And this is our last graph of replica data. They measure vehicle miles traveled, which is a little bit complicated because the way replica is getting their data is based on where people live. So this graph isn't showing specifically vehicle miles traveled in the region. It's showing vehicle miles traveled by people who live in the region. So if they're traveling out of the region, it will still end up in this graph. So just know it should match pretty closely to our regional VMT, but it's not exactly. And this is also data from the last year, not the last 3 years. So as you can see, the VMT has pretty much stayed flat, but have slightly increased over the last year. This matches with like other studies that have shown that after the 2020 rebound, the VMT have slightly increased compared to previous levels. And I'm not showing the 2019 data, but that matches. I looked at it myself and it was slightly lower, but also fairly stable compared to this past year of vehicle miles traveled. If you have any questions or you want to see any of those graphs a little more closely, I know they might have been a little small on your screen or in here on our screen. Feel free to post in the chat or raise your hand or unmute. Yeah, or you can email. Yeah, there's a question on the Zoom that asked how is replica data gathered? Surprising that bike trips would be constant through the winter. So from what I'm able to gather is it's also based on cell phone data, mostly because you're obviously not in a vehicle, and that would be based on the speed of people traveling. Yeah, and it's possible they have access to app data such as like Strava, which you put in your mode, but I'm not sure about that specifically, or if they have access to other apps that people would input their mode.
Are there any other questions? You can unmute yourself. Are there questions from in the room? All right. Well, hi, that was like very thorough and interesting. So this is definitely data that CDTC is going to continue to monitor, and especially with the replica data, try and validate it and get a better understanding of what we could use it for.
Yeah, the replica data we're still getting used to. So there's some webinars we're going to be going to over the next month that will have a better idea of how we can use it and what it can be used for.
Will be interesting to see how it relates to long-term trends.
Yeah. Really very interesting. And to continue CDTC's data collection efforts, we are going to do another contract for data services. So that will be collecting both traffic counts and bike head counts. Most of the contract will be traffic counts, but I think about a quarter to a third of the counts, we're going to reserve funds for bike ped counts, and those will be mostly related to like ongoing linkage or other planning studies that we have going on, but also looking at the locations that we monitor regularly as part of New Visions, the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. And then other locations that maybe, you know, where we can get before and afters for new facilities. As you all know, we purchased eco counters about a year ago, and one of them was stolen. And we are replacing that. And we have started deploying eco counters again with some increased safety mechanisms. So we do have a sticker on the counters that say it's the property of CDTC. We would like to build some sort of like web page where and have a QR code. So if people do see a counter and they're interested in the data, they could go to a web page and see what it is that we're collecting and how we're using it. That's kind of a long-term goal. So right now we have, go ahead. Did somebody want to say something?
I think they coughed.
Okay, never mind. Sorry. Okay, so right now we have one deployed at Bauer Environmental Park, and the schedule's a little bit off on the Rexford Bridge Trail one, but we are going to put one out there because we don't have a count there yet. And then in the next round of counts, we'll deploy one on the Erie Canal Community Connector Trail. We hope to put one on the Albany Skyway. We don't have any data for the Mohawk Harbor Trail in Schenectady, so we're going to install one there. We don't know when the third counter will be delivered. There's some delay in that, so I haven't included that third counter in the program, but if we do get it, we can add more locations. But as you can see, you know, we're still identifying locations where we want to conduct trail counts, because the eco counters are best suited for separated trail facilities and not really like sidewalks or bike lanes that could pick up mixed traffic. So if there's a location that you'd like to get a trail count on, please let me know. We're also coordinating with other entities that are collecting trail data, like the city of Saratoga Springs, Parks and Trails New York, and OPRHP, which is collecting data on sections of the Empire State Trail. So we hope to build this data set over time. And then we'll also be able to add local bike ped counts and have more regular data instead of just kind of going out and doing bike ped counts at certain locations every 10 years, like we've been doing. We'll have a more regular count to really be able to see what's going on. Building our data collection and the amount of data we have and that we can share has been something we've wanted to do for a while, and you know, we're really starting to build these data sets, and we hope to be able to use it in plans and to, you know, help municipalities with their planning efforts using this data. So if you have questions about data or have locations that you're looking for data, whether it's a traffic count, a bike ped count, a trail count, please get in touch and let me know, and I'd be happy to coordinate with you. So moving on to the other agenda items, there were 3 new traffic safety legislation law types of news. So as many of you know or saw, New York State did pass new legislation that authorizes municipalities to reduce speed limits to 25 miles per hour. So this is in New York State. If you didn't know, municipalities were unable to reduce speed limits to less than 30. So we have seen 2 municipalities, at least, we've seen like their city council members or other folks in the city proposing to pursue this. So we'll be watching that and see what communities do, what are the best practices for reducing speed limits, as far as like developing speed reduction plans, or, is there a data collection or some sort of safety analysis that should be done beforehand, or help guide communities through identifying roads where the speed limit could be dropped. But this is definitely something that, we were happy to see, and we're looking forward to seeing municipalities implement this to reduce crashes, especially with vulnerable road users. The second piece of legislation, which hasn't gotten as much publicity, is the increase in fines for leaving the scene of a car crash without reporting it. So hopefully this will deter hit and run incidents. I'm not going by like I've done a data analysis here, but I feel like anecdotally in the last 2 years, there've been, at least in the news, a lot of hit and runs, a lot of pedestrian and bike hit and run. So anything that can be done to deter that is good. And then the last thing, and this is something that has come up a lot at this table, and is something that the New York State MPO Association's Bike Ped Working Group had talked about and tried to work on for years without success, is adding bicycle and pedestrian related questions to the New York State driver's test. So obviously this is something where the benefits will kind of be a long-term, we'll see long-term as new drivers take the test and get their license. But before the number of questions on the New York State driver's test that were related to bicyclists and pedestrians, I think there were 2, one for pedestrians and one for bicyclists. So this will expand that, and hopefully we'll see its benefits. Ed, did you have a question?
Yeah, there was well, 2 things. There was also a bill passed both the House and the Senate that's still awaiting the governor's signature. That was introduced by, at least on the Assembly side, by Pat Fahey for a complete streets funding. That would, I think, provide like 87% state funding for complete streets aspects of a road project. So that's still out there. Whether that gets signed or not it's up in the air. The other question I had with regard to the 25 mile an hour speed limit, there's also a requirement in that legislation for a traffic engineer to sign off on that. And in Albany, when that came up, some thought that would require like a citywide traffic study, which would be like possibly a huge thing for the city to do. And the question came up whether or not the MPO could provide any modeling ideas for that. If you can think of anything off the top of your head that maybe what kind of role CDTC might help a municipality to do that kind of modeling.
I can't speak about modeling because that's not my wheelhouse. You can chime in if you have information, but I think that CDTC is definitely going to be happy to work with the municipalities. Again, we haven't identified a process or, good guidance on how to pursue this, but it's something that, we hope we can do. We're also planning another UPWP, Unified Planning Work Program solicitation in the next few months, which will be, asking municipalities what kind of planning or traffic study work do they need and how much funding assistance is required. And then we evaluate all those requests. And, as long as they're in line with our goals and objectives that are in the new visions plan, and we have budget for them, we'll fund them. But we expect that safety will be, a popular topic that communities will want to explore and may need additional information. It's also, you know, an area where we hope to be, you know, as our data expands, we hope to have more data. And actually, Ed, you may have more information. I know this hasn't been passed yet or signed, I should say, but the Safe Passages Program, Charles asked if there's any updated information or if anyone's familiar with it.
Yeah, well, that didn't get passed in the last session. And there was some question whether or not, I know when they were talking about the legislation, I was working with the State Safe Streets Coalition too. And which has had this whole slate of bills, of which 3 of those the ones that got passed, the bills that got passed, the one that's not yet signed. But there was a question whether or not they should leave it as the 3-foot law, which is, I guess, the law in what 35 states in the District of Columbia, or whether or not they should pursue something akin to what Jersey did, which is like a move over type law instead. And I think that kind of muddled things towards the end, and maybe that's a reason. But I think there was still some resistance with the Department of Transportation with regard to road widths and in New York, and whether or not, you know, this would encourage people to cross like a double yellow line. So it did, in the short, it didn't get passed this year. So it'll probably get reintroduced in some form next year.
Well, having been passed too close one time, only takes one time. I
Right.
can speak to this issue. 3 foot is established in part because it's easy to assess from the distance. It's about the size of your arm, adult arm. It's about the size of your hand grips on the bicycle. So it's something you can somewhat see and judge. The issue of, at that point, trying to get people to pass or not in an unsafe area, if you're behind a slow vehicle, and bicycles are vehicles, if you're behind a slow vehicle and there's no way to pass them, then you wait until there's a spot where you can pass. And that basically is what the police were asked to look for. I think the initial draft from years ago of 3 foot passing is the right way to go, same as all the other states you mentioned.
Yeah, I agree. That's just, you know, my opinion of why do something unique in New York if it's good enough for 35 other states and the District of Columbia, you know, why wouldn't we do the same here? As far as the, you know, the old law, I don't think, the other thing, people get hit and they're still, I've never, only once and just recently have I ever heard of anybody being charged with passing too close. And that was a person recently killed, I think, in the Amsterdam area, just in the past couple of months.
The person that had hit me in a 30-mile-an-hour zone was doing over 55 miles an hour based on the skid marks. She was ticketed for speeding in a 35-mile-an-hour zone, in addition to being a not well-skilled driver, but that's beside the point. But she was not ticketed for unsafe passing,
Right.
what she was trying to do. I can show you the stars.
Well, I mean, I think that, I guess with next session, if it's something that gets pushed again, we'll follow that, or, you know,
Keep at it.
yeah, and I usually follow the Albany Bicycle Coalition notes to see, because they do a really good job of tracking legislation. To see like what's in the works. We obviously know when things have been signed, and are going forward, but I appreciate the Bicycling Coalition's notes on ongoing, proposed bills and where they're at, so.
We really need something like that for pedestrians though. Cause as a
Passing
pedestrian, when you're passing and somebody passes you by about this much, it's extremely scary. If we're doing 35 or whatever, and it's like really 6 inches away. There really should be something for pedestrians as well as bicyclists.
I wonder if, there is something that applies to pedestrians, especially like on rural roads and
Yeah.
stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah, I had somebody killed just up the road from me last night, so.
So, um,
I
Yeah,
don't
I
know
mean,
what-
it perhaps it could be applied to like all vulnerable road users, which would be like pedestrians, people in wheelchairs or carts, bicycles. So, anybody who's out there.
A lot of people out there.
Yep.
That are not surrounded by steel, basically.
all right, so we'll. Trying. So as communities, if we work with a community that's pursuing reducing speed limit and doing traffic studies, like we'll definitely be sharing that information with everyone. We hope to, just see some best practices or guidance come out soon, on that. So, because like Ed said, I think there's a lot of questions around what it means to get the traffic engineer sign off. Does it mean you have to do a citywide traffic study? Do you just have to, do a quick data analysis? But, we'll see what works, and how this gets implemented.
Can I ask one question with regard to pedestrians, which the individual just brought up? With respect to sidewalks, I did get to go to that, at least most of that thing about the beacons, the crossing beacons. And one of the things they said about the crossing beacons is they get 80% compliance, which I guess doesn't say much for like crosswalks without those beacons. That must be, I'm guessing it's something less than 80%. What is the law with respect to sidewalks? Or crosswalks, specifically crosswalks, because it seems like people have been saying that it's much better in other states than it is in New York. What can we do in New York to get better compliance for stopping for people in crosswalks?
Well, I think that the law is yield to, and it,
Yeah, but we didn't have it for so long, and I think what they really need to do is enforcement. If they don't do enforcement, nobody's gonna stop.
yeah, I know, it's like when you cross the line into Massachusetts, people stop for you in the crosswalk. And here we still seem to have a little bit of trouble with that, so I'm sure it's a mix of enforcement and education and of course engineering, but yeah, I don't know why. I mean, behavior is really hard to.
Yeah, Jen, in Bethlehem, we've been having issues with crosswalks for quite some time. And I believe the law is really, as a pedestrian, you need to pass the fog line on the kind of into the crosswalk, past the fog line, in order for a driver to be required to stop or to yield. So I think if somebody's just standing kind of on this on the landing pad at the side of the road, there is no requirement for a driver to yield at that point. So that, I don't know how that compares to laws in other states, but that may be something to consider. And then one of the challenges with enforcement that we've seen is that our police cars, even if it's an undercover unit, people will see that there's enforcement in the area, and so they will comply because they see that they may get ticketed if they don't. But once that police car is away, from that particular crosswalk, the problem reemerges. So
Thanks, Nate.
Sure.
Okay, so our next agenda item, Rima, if you're on, do you want to talk about the Go Easy smartphone application briefly?
Sure. Can you hear me? So there is a smartphone app that is called Go Easy, and it is something that we're working on in partnership with the Federal Highway Administration. It is an app that tracks your movements for a little while, and then it starts doing this really cool thing where it starts making suggestions about how to improve your traveling routes. So it what it does is that it, it'll notice like, oh, you go from point A to point B, every morning, and then, do the reverse route every day. That must be your commute. And, gee, if, have you thought about, instead of driving there, and it can tell that you're driving, have you thought about, taking the bus instead? And there's this bus route that can take you, very close very close to your house to very close to your office, right around the times that you need to be leaving and arriving. So it kind of is created to sort of get you thinking about other ways that you can be traveling throughout your day, traveling, carrying out your sort of normal, typical routes that you would be typically taking, but just using different modes. And right now they're offering some rewards to try out the app. They are, if you sign up for it, you can by the 30th or start using it by September 30th, you can get gift cards to stores or restaurants like Amazon, Target, Starbucks, up to $5 a week.
Thanks, Rima.
Yep.
App also like integrates with your calendar, I've noticed. So like 30 minutes before it knows you have to be somewhere, it'll alert you and say, hey, have you thought about how you're going to get to school pickup or something? And it'll give you some ideas on some options for getting there. So it's been interesting just, to have it on my phone and see how it works. So if you're interested, the link is here, metropia.com/smartphone-rewards. When you sign up, it'll ask like what region you're in, and the Capital District is listed. So make sure you choose the Capital District.
And there's a Google app and an iPhone app as well.
Okay, then next agenda item is the adoption of the 2022-2027 Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP. It was adopted on September 1st by CDTC's policy board. And I know we've kind of gone through some of the bigger themes like in the TIP and the programming process and whatnot. The schedule for this update was drawn out much longer than it usually is. So I apologize for the constant, like, we don't know when we'll have a TIP, but stay tuned. But we do have a TIP now. And we did extensive public outreach mostly during the month of, it was July, August, mostly during August, which is not the best time to do public outreach and engagement, but we did put a lot of effort into it. We had 2 open houses, one in Albany County, one in Saratoga County. And then we did like pop-up tabling at farmers markets. We did a table event outside of the Albany Library. We tried to coordinate with other outreach on things like the bus lane study. So, and we set up a portal on the webpage for people to like learn more and take a poll and a survey. So here, these graphs just show the distribution of funds in the TIP in a couple of different ways. The total TIP program, what's new projects versus old projects. Old projects means projects that were in the previous tip that didn't move forward, so they get what we call rolled in, rolled over. And then versus the new projects and the total amount of funding there. The middle chart is new spending by project type. So even though bicycle and pedestrian looks small, we should remember that there are a number of complete street and bicycle and pedestrian facilities included in the other project types. So the project type is a little bit misleading. And if you go through the projects and all the projects are listed in the tip, you can see where there are other more complete street types of projects that were funded. And then new spending by county, so where that's allocated. And that includes all of the new spending, so that includes also like state, New York State projects, so interstate and state road investments. So I just wanted to show some of the charts we made based on the public input. I think that it might be hard to see in here, but hopefully on your computer screen you can see the bar chart on the left compares what was actually programmed in the tip versus what the public polling showed. So, you know, there of course is a little bit of difference. I don't remember the exact number, but you know, we didn't get an overwhelming number of survey results. So this isn't necessarily, you know, a good sample of everyone in the region, but based on people who did give public input, obviously there are folks that would like to see more invested in transit and bike ped, and less invested in some of the other areas. It's hard to explain what these different categories, project type categories mean or what they include, like in quick polls, but we hope to, you know, over time be able to improve our outreach and engagement strategies and the language we use and how we ask people for feedback. And then the chart on the right just kind of breaks down what the public preferred funding share of each project type was. Just a reminder that the Capital Coexist mini grant program, it's a rolling application process. It is still open, and there's also funding available for bike skill safety training. We have an LCI trainer who has agreed to work with us. So information on the Capital Coexist mini grants and the bike skill safety training are on the CDTC Capital Coexist webpage. Another funding reminder that the CDTC CDRPC Technical Assistance Program is open. And if your community has a project idea, we do ask that you reach out to discuss it before submitting an application. We'll help you work through the scope and the budget and if it fits into the program. And just a reminder, the bipartisan infrastructure law, there's new programs rolling out regularly. So CDTC has built a webpage, cdtcmpo.org/bill, BIL, which it has updated as new information is learned, as new guidance is released. As many folks may know, some of these deadlines to submit have passed. Others, like the Safe Streets for All, that's due later this week. And then other programs are anticipated to be announced in the next few months. So we know that it's really difficult to stay on top of all these different programs and if you're eligible and who can apply. So we've tried to break things down where possible. You know, for Safe Streets for All, we created the checklist. For the NEVI program, the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, we looked at the the eligibility and criteria and made a map so that people can see where they would have to be located to be eligible. So we'll continue to develop tools and guidance as we can so that communities that are pursuing these funds can use them. As always, please reach out if you have a question, if you're looking for data, or if you'd like us to just kind of look over an application for you to make sure, information is correct or that the objectives of like the next new visions or other plans are included. Speaking of new visions, our Metropolitan Transportation Plan, the virtual learning series is continuing. Last month, if you missed it, we had a webinar on rectangular rapid flashing beacons. So Andrew Tracy, who is an engineer in our office, walked through guidance on where to identify locations for them. And then Greenman Peterson had two, and I apologize to them because I forget their names, but they had two of their engineers on who really went into depth on the process of installing the rectangular rapid flashing beacons, as well as other types of mid-block crossing treatments. They went into like, when you dig, remember to do this, and help with like estimating costs. And there's a lot of detail in that webinar. We recorded it and it's on our the New Visions 2050 website, or you can find it on our YouTube channel. So if you're interested in rectangular rapid flashing beacons, mid-block pedestrian crossings, please check it out. There's a lot of good information there. And those presentations can also be downloaded from the website. Next Tuesday, next week is National Drive Electric Week. So we are going to do a webinar on planning tools for vehicle electrification. So this will include panelists from the Capital District Regional Planning Commission. They'll talk about how they're working with communities to identify grants and help them put in electric vehicle charging stations and support and promote EVs in their communities. We also have someone from Plug-in Stations Online, which is a company that installs the station. He's going to go through the process of installing a station. And then Luke Rogers from Albany County, as we'll talk about their experience with fleet electrification. Albany County, you may have seen in the news, they have replaced just a lot of their general operation vehicles with the Bolts and other plugins, but most recently the Sheriff's Department has started replacing vehicles with electric EVs. So we'll hear from them. And we are in the process. You may feel like we just adopted New Visions, and I still feel like we did, but it's been 2 years and we're going into year 3, and we generally update this every 5 years. So we do, and given all of the changes, like what Hein talked about with the regional traffic trends and work and lifestyle trend changes and economic changes, we feel like, it's a good time to kind of dig into information and see what's going on and plan for an update. So we are scoping that now to begin the process next year. And then the last CDTC item is just the status of CDTC funded planning initiatives. And this was attached to the agenda that went out. It will be in the meeting notes, but just some updates. The Patroon Creek Greenway study is complete. We're very excited and pleased with the final plan. It is a very ambitious plan, and it has a big price tag, but I think that the consultant did a really good job of identifying ways to make that connection from 6 Mile Waterworks Park to the riverfront, and hoping that a number of municipalities, potential sponsors, can coordinate and over time, look at how to implement that project. So that final plan can be found on the project website, and we'll be posting it to the CDTC website soon. and I apologize because I can't see. I can't
Who's
even-
doing that study for you or
The chairman.
who's doing that study for you?
Yeah, it was Berkman
Okay.
did that, yep. Carrie, do you want to give an update on the Federal Street project in Troy?
I'm sorry. We finished the public outreach period for that project, and the consultant now is working diligently to put together draft recommendations, but from the beginning, they have been focused on looking at the potential for roundabouts at, along the river and then at Sixth.
Thanks, Carrie. And then similarly for the waterfront connectivity study, public engagement was done over the summer and the consultant is drafting the report. And then we have 3 new studies where the REI has either just been released or we've just received proposals, and that includes the Town of Brunswick's Hoosick Road Corridor Study, the Sand Creek Road Complete Feasibility Study right outside our office here, and then the City of Schenectady's Albany and Crane Street Linkage Study. So as those move forward, we'll update everyone on that. Other regional projects, the bus lane study is, I think public outreach is coming to a close and that study is being finalized. Right now, we are doing outreach on the Smart Mobility Toolbox or Smart Communities Guidebook. There's a project website where you can do kind of some self-led public involvement, watch some short videos and take some surveys. The Smart Mobility Toolbox is really about looking at strategies that can that use new and advanced technologies to improve mobility, accessibility, safety of transportation in the region. It's looking at technologies that aren't necessarily currently used in the region. They may be used elsewhere, but they are feasible here. And the public comment period is it's definitely for our local planners and engineers and officials to see how they feel about the different technologies and integrating them and how to operate them. But then also for the public in terms of, how does the public feel about technology? What are their comfort level with different kinds of technology, whether it's a smartphone, whether it's cameras and sensors, what are the concerns and what is the level of comfort? So if you haven't already, I definitely encourage you to go to the CDTC smartmobility.com project website and take that survey there. So we have some time. So if anyone here or online would like to give an update on something that they're working on or a new initiative that they want to make other people aware of, can do that. Ivan?
Assemblyman Phil Stack is and his staff are trying to put together a way of recognizing one of the people that helped me with the access from Menance to the across 787 and to the river. And there will be a dedication to that person, Ron Miller, at probably near the Wars Lane interchange access point that CDTC thankfully had supported and has been built. But I don't have a date for that event, but it will be soon. And I hope to also mention at the time that there are other ways that could be gotten to that same area, Little River, which I had Sandy knows about it at CDTC. that are going to be there, maybe in my lifetime, maybe not.
Thank you, Ivan.
Jenna, just two things. Federal Highway Administration has recently released information on the retro reflectivity requirements and standards for pavement markings. So local communities, counties, and states are looking at that information. There's a lot of good webinars that Federal Highway has already had and will be scheduling. So locally, I know, working with our highway department to see how that will impact local roads. And even if it doesn't impact us at a local level based on trips, we still want to follow a best practice model for pavement reflectivity with crosswalks. In addition to that, 2 weeks ago, we got our clear access, which is replacing the ALIS system that New York State DOT has been working on for many years. So I was able to get rid of Microsoft Internet Explorer and actually use a up-to-date browser. Went on it for the first time. It's a very user-friendly system. So I think that's great that that's up and running for the communities to use.
Thanks, John. Does anyone on the Zoom have Ed?
Yeah, just two quick questions. Could you put a link in the chat for that survey you were talking about, the mobility survey? And the other question I had was, there was a lot in the news, maybe going back about 8 months ago, about treatments or something happening with the two bridges over to Troy from Waterville and also from Green Island. And I don't know if it's related to like the Federal Street project that you were talking about, but I don't see anything. I haven't heard any news about what was going on with the bridges themselves. Any news or anybody have any idea what's going on with that?
Well, there was the Congress Street Bridge proposed redesign. And we had Lindsay Zefting, when she was with Alta, present on that a while back. I don't know the status of that, but I'm looking at Carrie and I don't think that she has information.
Well, are you, so there has been some discussion about a bike path, I'll use that term.
Right.
On the north side of Federal Street, connecting Green Island to Troy. And I don't know the current status of the agreement or lack thereof between the two municipalities, and I believe the funding was set and available, ready to go for that. So that proposal is being incorporated into the Federal Street project that CDTC is doing, but I don't know the current status of the actual bike path on the bridge.
Any suggestions on where someone could check and see where that's going? Or
Yeah, Troy should be able to tell you.
Yeah, I think both actually bridges, they were thinking of putting a bike lane on the north side. The
Right.
Congress Street one, the thing is I think that was all part of the study they were looking at also, which I think they just got funded. Or it's in the tip, I think. Some of the work I think may be in the, was one of the new things in the tip, so you have to look at the tip funding.
that was for the Congress Street?
Congress Street. For the Federal Street, I don't know what that's doing, but I think that there was one of the things in the Congress Street that had one of the tip projects on the Congress Street, I think.
Okay, I can look at the tip. I don't recall exactly what project it was, but I'll take a look.
Yeah, I think we don't have many in Rensselaer County, so it'll be pretty easy.
Yeah, okay.
And Ivan, with respect to that dedication you were talking about, are you talking about the link from Manans over to the bike trail over by the old Monkey Ward's building?
At Ward's Lane, initial location was near Montgomery Ward's.
Right.
And it's an existing 1970 built interchange, which was built much too large, of course, with Montgomery Ward's tour guides and all sorts of shopping areas that are not destinations at this point. So there's plenty of room, but there was in addition an underpass that was built under the southbound entrance, which gives the trail location a little bit of interest.
Yeah.
A little bit of an uphill you need, but potential to connect up to all sorts of open spaces in some very interesting wetlands and natural areas that are publicly owned. So it's a project that can expand to long-term benefits to the area. And it gets the community at downtown Manans, such as it is, access to the river, which was completely cut off by 787.
Thank you.
Jen?
Hi, thank you, Ivan, for sharing your identification of opportunities for different places in Manans. I wanted just to say, we really appreciate here in Clifton Park, the DOT adding in sidewalks on the emergency replacement of the Sitterly Road Bridge. That was something that, I think that the communities of Clifton Park and Half Moon had put in a new sidewalk a little bit further east on Sitterly Road recently, with TIP funding and DOT support in that case. So there had been a precedent of having some sidewalks on Sitterly Road. So when unfortunately this emergency bridge situation came up, the fortunate part was that there was, they could see the connection was there, that we're starting to make that connection from Half Moon to Clifton Park happen. And so we are super appreciative that sidewalk got built and wider shoulders on the bridge for across Sitterly Road over the Northway. So we are, I encourage every community to keep looking for those small, important segments and opportunities and keep talking about it, keep promoting it. We were so grateful that the communities had previously made that investment in a small sidewalk, critical, just small piece, so that every little piece in place can help lead to the next segment. So just wanted to share that positive success and that the bridge is open and the sidewalk is open and already in use. So thanks.
Thanks, Jen. Any other updates?
Hi, Jen. I can give an update for Bethlehem. So in late June, the town of Bethlehem town board adopted a comprehensive plan update for the town of Bethlehem. And right now we're looking forward to zoning updates following that. I think one of the more major bike and pedestrian focused projects will be an active transportation plan. No immediate timeline on when that'll happen, but that's kind of one of the first big steps for us. The town is also currently looking at a public education and safety campaign around bicycle and pedestrian issues, notably crosswalk compliance, which came up earlier. And I think we'd be looking at materials kind of similar to the Capital Coexist stuff, but maybe updated, maybe video, some radio spots, but our bike and pedestrian committee is active working on that with the town supervisor and staff working for a town supervisor. So that'll be an evolving project and keep everybody up to date on how that's going. And then we're also working with a couple neighborhoods in town right now who have a history of speeding issues. And we're looking into speed humps, installation of speed humps on some different roadways in town, but working with some neighborhood, project champions to kind of gather neighborhood support for those installations. So if we get enough support for them, then I think we'll go ahead and do it. kind of some pilot projects. But we may be doing some speed hub work in Bethlehem. So that's it for me.
Thanks, Nate. We'd love to definitely, hear about progress, especially with like developing public education materials and, if the town pursues an active transportation plan. So keep us updated.
Yeah, we'll do. Thanks.
Any more updates? If there are no other updates, I do want to remind everyone, we're hoping to, have more of a discussion about it or talk about, tools available or resources available to folks, but walk and roll to school is October 5th. And there is a walk and roll toolkit on CDTC's Capital Codes This webpage. So if you know schools in your community that are participating and can point them towards that, that'd be great. We have been receiving requests for materials. We have those LED bracelets, which kids really love. So we'd be happy to, fulfill those requests, and if you want to hand them out at any events. Also, I know Martin didn't mention it, but the CDRPC's planning and zoning workshop is next month. So the registration information is open and on their website. So our next meeting is Tuesday. Oh, Martin said October 28th is the planning and zoning workshop in Troy at Hudson Valley Community College. So our next meeting is October 11th, 9 a.m. We do have people here in the office today, so I thank everyone for coming. We would love to see you all again in person, so please feel free to come, and we will give you our wonderful free coffee. We upgraded our creamer, so we have flavors now. We have more tea flavors. We're doing everything. I can even bring out some chocolate. Whatever you guys want. We'd love to see you back in the office. But thank you for joining us virtually too. So until then, I hope everyone enjoys this change in weather and fall and takes care of themselves. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. We'll send out meeting notes as soon as we can. Thank you, everyone.